All right, so how to optimize images for SEO. Obviously, no images, but no, for real. Heavy images with a lot, websites with a lot of images tend to display slower because there's a lot of resources that need to be loaded. However, it's understandable that you might want to have a lot of images on your website. So there are a few things I like to keep in mind. Is obviously the fewer the better. Not overdoing a site with images just because. So like I don't like to put like slideshows on homepages for that reason. It's just a bunch of extra images that aren't necessarily needed up front. Galleries and whatnot can be on different pages when people have a more specific intent to see that information instead of having it pushed in front of them without that intent. However, when we do have images, there's a few things I like to keep in mind. And one is like, when you have like a large image, you want to make sure that it's not any larger than it needs to be. So for example, most websites have what I call a hero section. That's the section right below the header up here. It's usually right below it, and that's where the main call to action is, your value proposition in large letters. And a lot of times they'll have a really large background image that is a background image. If you're a photographer and you need clarity and crispness of that image, then I understand if you need to make that image larger to maintain that integrity. But most other businesses, it's a background image. Obviously we don't want a ton of graininess or artifacting or blurriness. So we do need to compress it. But the first thing is actually making sure that we resize it and crop it to the appropriate dimensions that fit the space. So you don't need to have a portrait style image loaded on your website at full camera quality for a horizontal background. You want to actually crop down the image so that the aspect ratio matches roughly where it's going. And then you want it to be resized down to the largest it needs to be. Keeping in mind that there are people that have 30-inch widescreen monitors, and if they were to, stretch your website out to 30 inches, most every image is going to look like crap. So we want to think about what's reasonable. And so I like to think, I'm on a 15-inch MacBook Pro. I also run off a couple of 24-inch monitors. There are going to be people, I rarely go full screen on my monitors, and I think that's pretty common. So I like to keep some of my large images capped out around 1400 to 1600 pixels wide as the largest. And once they have them cropped down, then to the largest size they need to be, then running them through a tool like compressed JPEG or compressedpng.com. Those are some great websites you can upload an image directly to the website and then play with a little bit of the compression. I've been able to take, images that were 500 to 600 kilobytes and get them cut down to 200 kilobytes, which is a significant savings. And so generally speaking, that's my goal, is if I can get the largest image on the site around 200K and everything else smaller than that, then I feel like I've been pretty successful. And then obviously we talked early on, I mentioned like the fewer images, the better. So when I'm looking at a single page that's not like a gallery portfolio kind of page, I still try and keep the total size of all my images combined like less than 2 megabytes. Because that, most of us do have fast internet. And so a lot of page loading time isn't necessarily a huge factor anymore. But when it is a factor it tends to matter a lot more. And so I found that most things under 2 megs or less can still load pretty quickly.